If you never examine the mistakes of your past, you're doomed to repeat them. If you ignore it, it'll just morph and change and be a part of every generation. Desegregation may have legally ended a generation ago, but hate still bubbles under the surface, boils up in instances of violence throughout America. Innocent people attacked because of their color, their religion, their gender, their disability, or who they love. Civil rights activist Hosea Williams led the first attempt to march to Montgomery to gain voting rights for African Americans in the South. He was beaten by state troopers and others when the group refused to turn back. I'm Wendell Pierce. I played Reverend Hosea Williams in the movie Selma. Just 3 days after Selma was released nationwide, an Iowa black man was brutally beaten at a local bar, knocked out by men who said they hated black people. Barely conscious, the attackers kicked him, then stomped on his head. More than 50 years may have passed since the march from Selma to Montgomery, and we have seen progress, but hate is still in America. And as you'll see over the next half hour, its depth is hardly known. It is sometimes ignored. It is most certainly undercounted. As a country, we say that we want it to end. We say that we've had enough. But are some of our law enforcement agencies doing enough? Are they doing their part to end the hate? Remember that black man beaten in Iowa? According to some law enforcement agencies, that hate crime never counted. Tonight, we examine those mistakes in this Investigate TV special, Measure of Hate. Here's Director of Investigations, Lee Zurich.
The FBI is the primary federal agency responsible for investigating hate crimes. Tonight, we have serious questions for an agency that investigates lawbreakers, because the FBI is breaking the law itself. But first, we'll show you what got us to that finding as we investigate the larger issue, the underreporting of hate crimes in America.
New numbers from the FBI show Americans reported more hate crimes last year.
Federal statistics.
More than 7,000 reported nationwide.
Reported in news stories across the world.
A new FBI report has found a spike in hate crimes in the United States.
But what you may not realize is that a national expert calls those statistics
just incomplete and unreliable.
Every year, the FBI releases hate crime data, and every year that data is wrong.
And they talk about all these numbers as if they're accurate, as if they're correct.
But they're not.
And they're not.
I don't come down here very often because it brings me so much memories of me and her.
For proof, meet Lexi Shea and hear her late friend Mercedes Williamson's story.
Her heart was full of gold. Like she was willing to do everything for anybody.
Williamson's heart stopped beating on May 30th, 2015.
She was like everything to me. She was not my best friend. She was more like my sister. And I miss her to this day. I wish she would have told me that everything would be all right.
Williamson's ex-boyfriend, Josh Valum, killed her. After he blasted her chest with a stun gun, Valum stabbed her with a pocket knife and delivered several fatal blows to her head with a hammer. Mercedes Williamson died at the age of 17.
He killed her because she was transgender.
Yes, sir.
Prosecutors say Valum kept Williamson's gender identity a secret from his family and friends.
He was in the gang, and if they found out that he was associated with somebody that is not that is like gay or transgender, they would either like kick him out of the gang or he had to kill her.
Valum pleaded guilty in South Mississippi to a federal hate crime. But still, according to FBI hate crime data, Mercedes Williamson's death never happened. It doesn't appear in the statistics.
It makes me feel that Mercedes probably will never get her justice.
Investigate TV reviewed the FBI hate crime data for several years and found many stories like this. A group of white people targeted a black man in Jackson, Mississippi, beating him and running him over with a car. Several street gang members beat a 20-year-old gay man with a tire as he left an Atlanta grocery store, yelling homophobic slurs. A declared white supremacist attempted to bomb a Martin Luther King Jr. unity parade in Spokane, Washington. People are in prison for each of these crimes. Each of them admitted they attacked because of hate, but none of these crimes is counted in federal hate crime data.
If the information that is being generated, obtained, disseminated is faulty, what does it matter? Now you're just relying on bad data, which is supremely unhelpful.
Cynthia Deedle now works as Programs and Operations Director of the Matthew Shepard Foundation.
This afternoon I signed into law the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act,
which has declared a mission to erase hate. For 20 years, she worked on hate crimes at the FBI.
Every agency, in my opinion, should absolutely report without question.
Congress makes the Department of Justice collect and publish hate crime data from law enforcement agencies across the country, but Congress doesn't require local agencies to submit. It's voluntary.
Congress mandates the FBI collect the data.
True.
But doesn't mandate anything else.
No.
Should more be mandated?
Of course.
In 2017, of the 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the country, 2,000 didn't submit a thing. Of the 16,000 that reported hate crimes that year, 88% reported zero.
I don't understand the mentality behind those police executives where they think we're just not going to play that game. We're just not going to send the data in. Why?
We found police departments in Birmingham, Indianapolis, and Jackson, Mississippi didn't participate in 2017 reporting. The Jackson Police Department told us if it's something that we would consider a hate crime, then we would deem it necessary and report it to the FBI. But we found a Jackson synagogue vandalized in 2013. Police called it a hate crime, but it never ended up in the FBI's data.
I would expect more crimes like that to have been reported.
Benny Thompson represents Jackson, Mississippi in Congress. He wants every law enforcement agency in the country reporting hate crimes and is looking at the possibility of making it a requirement.
One of the things that we have decided to do is file legislation that would require the strengthening of the reporting.
The most visible hate crime event of 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia, led to the death of 32-year-old Heather Heyer.
She was passionate about social justice.
Heyer went to Charlottesville on August 12, 2017 to protest a white supremacist rally.
She was a normal person taking a stand with her friends, and she was murdered by someone who was just out to murder whoever.
James Fields drove to the rally from Ohio and killed Heyer, running over her with his car. Federal prosecutors charged Fields with 29 counts of violations of the Hate Crime Act. But in the third quarter of 2017, when Fields killed Heyer, federal hate crime data indicates Charlottesville had 0 hate crimes.
There's obviously a huge flaw in the reporting system.
Heather Heyer's mother says better numbers could mean better protection.
If we don't know the full extent of hate crimes, we're not properly allocating resources.
When she hears the yearly news reports,
shocking statistics from the FBI,
she knows the reality. We live in a country that isn't accurately calculating the depth of hate.
If hate crimes are as underreported as they seem to be, do we have a really huge crisis on our hands? Do we have a minor crisis on our hands? What exactly is happening? We don't even know.
Reported more hate crimes last year.
You just heard the story of one transgender woman murdered. People in that community say they're frequent targets of violence. Their cases are often left unsolved, and as we discovered, uncounted. In 2017, Misha Caldwell was shot and left on this rural Mississippi road. That same year, someone gunned down China Gibson outside a New Orleans shopping center. Both murders remain unsolved. Neither is counted in FBI numbers, but their friends say they should be.
No one knows exactly what happened. All I do know is that one of my best friends is now gone because, someone else couldn't understand or, had issues with whoever she was.
And they're hate crimes because all of that rage, it stemmed from a place of hate.
Next on the measure of hate, the FBI shuns the law. The InvestigateTV team analyzed 10 years of hate crimes to see the extent of the FBI's failure. That's next on Measure of Hate.
While it's optional for local departments to report hate crimes, Congress requires every federal law enforcement agency, including the FBI, to submit hate crime statistics. It's the law, but for years the FBI has ignored that directive, failing to submit its own hate crime statistics.
Amite, Louisiana, a 22-year-old woman locked in an outdoor cage.
Nobody deserves to be treated this way.
Prosecutors say her family forced the woman to eat her own mother's ashes, perform sex acts, and shot her with a BB gun.
To live in these conditions anywhere in the world is unacceptable.
The reason they tortured her? Because she has a disability, autism. A federal indictment charged them with a hate crime, but the crime never showed up in the FBI's hate crime statistics.
How concerning is it to you that the FBI is not reporting its own numbers?
Well, they should. They should.
InvestigateTV analyzed 10 years of Justice Department news releases on hate crime prosecutions and found at least 65 high-profile cases the FBI investigated, from murders to bombings that never ended up in the federal database the agency itself maintains. Like in Brownsville, Tennessee, deputies caught Daniel Coward and Paul Schlesselman shooting out a church window on their way to carrying out a plan to kill nearly 100 black people. Both men pleaded guilty to hate crimes, yet no agency, including the FBI, reported it in the federal database.
We need to get it right.
Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy says he planned to speak with U.S. Attorney General William Barr.
What are you going to say to him?
I'm going to say, look, there are reports, you've seen the media reports, that crimes, including but not limited to hate crimes, are not being accurately reported or completely reported by the FBI. Could you look into it? What's your response? What can we do to improve it?
Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy from Vermont was more direct.
I'm hoping they're not ignoring a congressional mandate.
Our investigation found they are ignoring it, failing to submit their own hate crime statistics.
If they're not, I will land on them like a ton of bricks.
Think of it this way. The FBI arrests people for breaking the law. The law clearly requires the FBI to submit and publish its own hate crime numbers. By ignoring that, the FBI itself is breaking the law.
Someone needs to hold them to account for that.
Longtime FBI agent Cynthia Deitel blames herself. The former chief of the FBI's Civil Rights Division says she should have done more. She should have spoken up.
I'm disappointed in myself. I'm disappointed in the fact that I think I had a missed opportunity. I could have done more at the time with the Bureau to cast a serious focus on the hate crime reporting issue, and I should have done that. I should have figured out a better way forward so that you and I wouldn't be here talking about the system that's broken.
The Justice Department has even acknowledged a broken system when it comes to hate crime reporting, what it calls a gap in statistics.
Together we can find ways to improve reporting of hate crimes.
It announced an $840,000 grant last year to look at hate crime reporting. The goal, ironically, to understand why hate crimes aren't being reported by local law enforcement to the FBI.
I hope the FBI is given the opportunity to talk about, okay, well, why didn't they report? Because if that study is going to focus on non-reporting agencies, the FBI has to be a part of that. And they have to realize that they are a leader in this space, in the hate crime space, and they have to do more to show their leadership and their commitment to hate crime reporting.
In 2015, Matthew Gust went to a Grand Forks, North Dakota gas station and filled a 40-ounce beer bottle with gasoline, turning it into a Molotov cocktail. He threw the bottle inside a Somali restaurant.
I don't know what they're into, but is something that's not unacceptable.
Gust admitted in federal court he meant to intimidate the employees and customers because of their national origin, a federal hate crime absent from 2015 hate crime statistics.
Every day that goes by that this issue isn't fixed is a problem, in my opinion. Every day that goes by that we are not reporting our own data, that we have not figured out as a society how to fix this problem is a crucial mistake. It's a lost opportunity.
We need to get it fixed. The reports need to be accurate.
Senator John Kennedy says a lost opportunity for law enforcement officials to figure out the measure of hate.
These crimes, we track the data and we look for patterns. And if they're not being reported, then we don't know where to put our law enforcement resources.
For 7 months, the FBI rejected our requests for interviews. This might help show you the depth of the agency's failure. In our review of every FBI hate crime news release, we found those 65 cases not included in the numbers. But for another 59 cases, it was unclear. By the way the FBI releases the numbers, we couldn't determine if they were or weren't included.
The FBI finally responds to the InvestigateTV stories. In hate crime laws so weak, a prosecutor decides to exploit his own state's laws to prove they're worthless. That's coming up on Measure of Hate.
States around the country have hate crime laws so weak, prosecution is almost impossible. In Alaska, we found 4 2017 crimes reported in the FBI statistics. But Alaska authorities can't prosecute someone for a hate crime. The law only allows enhanced sentencing of another crime. It's even worse in Kentucky. They have a law. Prosecutors call it a bad one.
Well, I think Kentucky's hate crime law is pretty toothless. We have it, it exists, but it doesn't really do much of anything.
Prosecutor Rob Sanders wanted to prove the law meant nothing. He tested his theory in a case where a group of men, including Devlin Burke, assaulted women while yelling anti-gay slurs.
At the time I was thinking this would be a perfect case to use as an example of just how toothless Kentucky's hate crime is, that we would designate it as a hate crime. We would go forward and let the public see that it really doesn't change much of anything.
The judge agreed the incident outside the bar met the state's legal definition of a hate crime. However, as Sanders predicted, no additional time was tacked on to Burke's sentence. In October of 2018, 2 people were shot dead in a Kentucky Kroger. Police said the shooter killed because the victims were black.
We can't charge a hate crime because it's not even covered for homicide.
Just another reason another prosecutor says this law is not worth the paper it's printed on.
If it were up to me, I would tear it up and start all over.
4 states have no hate crime laws. Georgia, South Carolina, Arkansas, and Wyoming provide no protections for hate crime victims.
Next on Measure of Hate. Law enforcement agencies across the country admit to InvestigateTV they were wrong and vow to correct their records.
Measure of Hate got results. We went to many local departments to find out why they didn't report hate crime statistics to the FBI. After we started asking questions, departments vowed to change their records, promising to submit serious hate crimes to the database. In Charlottesville, Virginia, the death of Heather Heyer will now be counted as a hate crime.
So let's just start with correcting the record that it will be changed, right? Those numbers, you have the ability to amend numbers based on new information, new facts, and new reporting.
The arson of the Somali Cafe in Grand Forks, North Dakota will now also count.
When somebody asked why didn't this appear in Grand Forks statistics, and I said it makes no sense, it should have. And so that's when we took a look at it.
Other departments say they're working to make changes, including Vermont State Police, which says it had 5 or 6 incidents in 2017 that should have been counted.
We recognize now that these incidents have a significant impact on the community. So yeah, we need to do a better job cleaning that up.
Florida State University's Hate Crime Research and Policy Institute saw our reports and plans to launch a research project based on our findings. Florida State asked for our data and said they would utilize a similar process for the university's study. But the most significant result, Measure of Hate held the FBI accountable, exposing the agency shunning the law. The FBI rejected our repeated requests for an on-camera interview, but following 7 months of our questions and a story that aired on television stations across the country, an FBI spokesperson finally told us the agency planned to start submitting hate crime data in 2021, but specifically said it wouldn't report this year. But after more questions and more reporting, the FBI sped up that schedule, and in November of this year, for the first time ever, released its own hate crime statistics.
Oh, I think it's very significant.
The 2018 mass shooting at the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue killed 11 people. When the FBI released hate crime data this year, the Pittsburgh field office confirms it included the synagogue shooting in the numbers. In prior years, a shooting like this likely would have been missing from the hate crime statistics. 40 of the 56 field offices submitted hate crime numbers. After years of breaking the law, the FBI took a significant step to be compliant and transparent.
My hope is that those numbers will increase in credibility and accuracy.
The FBI told us it understood the importance of reporting this information and worked to implement FBI reporting ahead of the scheduled date, adding starting next year all field offices will report. What all of this means? Sometime in the next few years, when the media reports on hate crime statistics in our country, we'll truly be able to see a more accurate measure of hate.
My father, Amos Pierce Jr., fought in World War II. Dad was an Army corporal. He served on the island of Saipan in the Pacific.
An American task force moves on Saipan.
My father's unit earned medals, 6 of them, but a white military officer dismissed his claim. Dad endured so much racism like this, but still fought for his country. We wouldn't have won World War II without African Americans, or Native Americans, or Hispanics. We were on the same team, one mission, to beat the hate that guided the other side. The losing side. I have hope, because more than 60 years after my father fought for this country, the military finally made good, and he received those medals. I've shared that story before because we should all know about things like this that have happened. And that's the thing. We need to have conversations for there to be change. Change in awareness, laws, in protection. But for us to have these conversations, we need accurate information. Because until we get the accurate numbers, the true information, we'll never be able to put an end to it. We'll never know the true measure of hate.